This is a quipu. It doesn't look like much. At first glance, you might just think it's a mop, but it's actually much, much more than that. It's a document, and a computer, and somehow a language? Let me back up. When Spanish conquistadors made their way across South America, they found the powerful Inca civilization. And as they were looting through their treasures, they kept finding these things. In government buildings and the homes of powerful nobles and warlords, these mop-head-looking things just popped up everywhere, and they were clearly important, but why? What they discovered was that hidden in the twists and the knots of these quipus were encoded information. Every knot had a different meaning. Where the knots were located on the strings had a different meaning. The twists of the strings, the color, the texture, all of it meant something. They were ledgers that recorded transactions, kept census data, some even contained entire family histories. They were like the everything app that maintained one of the most powerful civilizations in human history. What other cultures did with clay tablets or scrolls, the Incas did with string. And this worked for hundreds of years. And then, yeah, all that information was lost. I mean, it's still there, obviously, encoded in the strings, but nobody knows how to read them. It's one of the most bizarre languages in human history, and it's become almost completely lost to time. But we may be getting close to cracking the code. Researchers from Harvard and other universities have been scouring through hundreds of these artifacts and are slowly untangling the information stored in these knots and strings. What they find inside could give a whole new perspective of not just a great civilization, but of language itself. See what I did there? Untangling? Quality content. According to the Language Conservancy, the world has lost more than half of all human languages since 1795. 61% to be exact. In fact, at the moment, we're losing 9 languages a year. And they think that'll go up to 16 by the year 2080. That's a language every 2 weeks. Some of the most endangered languages include Nafusi, Picard, Sierra Teutonic, Tolowa, Udmurt, Uru, Valo, Wintu Namlaki, Yagan, and Yorubawi. Now, if those sound like a bunch of indigenous languages you've never heard of, that's because they are. And according to UNESCO, of the 7,000 languages currently spoken, 6,700 are currently threatened. And yeah, most of those are indigenous. It's actually kind of wild when you think about it. 7,000 languages are spoken and 6,700 are threatened. Good Lord. But then again, why does this matter? I mean, wouldn't it be better to have fewer languages? I mean, fewer languages means fewer language barriers, right? Well, because when a language dies, we lose ideas from that culture. We lose a bit of history. Like, we hear the terms prehistory and recorded history a lot. Well, a lot of that recorded history is recorded in languages that are no longer spoken. So when we lose a language, a little more recorded history becomes prehistory. We lose a connection with where we came from. And that does matter. Plus, a lot of the tools that historians use to get past the myths of history, you know, the hard data like accounting books and inventories, they're gone. Like, it's kind of hard to overstate what a big deal the Rosetta Stone was. Almost the entirety of the Egyptian civilization, a civilization that lasted in various forms for 3,000 years, had been completely forgotten to time. All those hieroglyphs covering all those walls, basically spelling out the entire history of their civilization, and literally nobody could read them. Which is kind of amazing when you think about it. I'm going to have to come back to that later. Anyway, and then in 1799, one of Napoleon's troops kind of dug up this slab of marble while they were building a fortification, and it had a whole bunch of writing on it. It was written by the priests of a temple in Memphis, basically declaring their support for the new King Ptolemy V. It was a decree. It was ancient Egyptian government paperwork, or I guess marble work in this case, but nothing that interesting about it, except it was written 3 times. Once in ancient Greek, once in Demotic, which is a cursive Egyptian script that was still in use, and once in hieroglyphics. And because they could read the ancient Greek and the Demotic text, they could tell that it was the same inscription. So then they just matched up the words with the hieroglyphics, and then it was like they had the Little Orphan Annie decoder ring, y'all.
Drink your Ovaltine. Ovaltine?
That's a gross oversimplification. It was way more complicated than that. There was actually this whole competition to decipher it between an English guy named Thomas Young and this French guy named Jean-Francois Champollion. Champollion won. It was a whole thing. But this opened up literally all of Egyptian history for the first time. Like an entire new field of study came out of it. By the way, if you're ever curious what's actually on the Rosetta Stone in those 3 languages, I've got it right here. I'll read it for you real quick. It says, on the 24th day of the month Gorpreos, which correspondeth to the 24th day of the 4th month of the season Pert, of the inhabitants of Tamurt, which is Egypt, and the 23rd year of the reign of Horus Ra the Child, who hath risen as king upon the throne of his father, the lord of the shrines of Nekhebet and Uachet, the mighty one of twofold strength, the stabilizer of two lands, the beautifier of Egypt, whose heart is perfect or benevolent toward the gods, the Horus of gold, who maketh perfect the life of the Hementet beings, the lord of the 30-year festivals like Ptah, the sovereign prince like Ra, the king of the south and north. You know, this goes on a bit. Good lord. Anyway, the point is, the Rosetta Stone was not a banger, but it did open up the secrets of an entire ancient civilization. Now, unfortunately for the Incas, there hasn't really been a Rosetta Stone for their string language. Maybe be the Rosetta String. But here's what we do know. It all started with the Quechua people, who showed up in the Andes Mountains of South America around the year 1400. They started out as a tiny highland tribe, but in just over 100 years, they grew to conquer and control the largest empire in the Americas, eventually reaching over 10 million people. Its capital was in Cuzco, Peru, and its control extended from what is today Ecuador to Chile and Bolivia. It was a farming civilization, with a vertical society governed by the Inca and his relatives. Oh yeah, the Inca didn't actually call themselves the Incas. Inca was the name of their leader, which was a god king like an Egyptian pharaoh. Actually, Inca extended the entire family, but yeah, the Inca was the leader. Yeah, it was the Spanish who decided to just call the entire culture the Inca, which would be like calling every Egyptian a pharaoh, or every Roman an emperor, or every American Taylor Swift. Ugh, I hate these Spaniards coming in here and just telling us what to do and giving us all these diseases. Yeah, but they did promote us all to Inca. They did? Hey, cool metal suit, bro. The actual name of the Inca Empire was the Tahuantinsuyu, or Land of the Four Corners, because that's what was created when four tribes came together. But regardless of what they were called, they were a powerful empire that featured advanced systems of roads, a centralized economy, oppressive architecture, and a distinctive style of art. And they did all of this without a written language. Instead, they communicated with the Quipu, which is a system of knots and strings that they could carry around with them. By the way, there are two different spellings of Quipu, one with a Q and one with a KH. I saw them used about equally in my research, so there apparently isn't really a wrong way to spell it. They're both used equally. I'm going with the Q version for this one for no particular reason other than we started with it and I'm too lazy to change it. So, just getting that out there. Which, let's just get this out of the way right now. This is a brilliant system for transporting information around, especially over treacherous mountain terrain. You can compact it down really small to fit in a pack. It's lightweight. It's made out of inexpensive material. I mean, compare that to the marble slabs of the Rosetta Stone or delicate papyrus scrolls. They started out mostly as a counting tool to store numerical data, things like census info, military numbers, calendar dates, tax details. But it's believed that over time they evolved to serve artistic and even literary purposes. And they started out a long time ago. Archaeological evidence suggests they go back to at least 770 AD, maybe even older than that. In fact, in 2005, researchers found a collection of devices that were basically strings twisted around small sticks that dated back to the Coral Supe civilization around 4,000 to 4,500 years ago. These might have been like a proto-Quipu. But that's mostly just speculation. Our strongest evidence of them being used before the Incas was from the Middle Horizon Wari Empire that started around 600 AD. What this suggests is that it wasn't the powerful Inca Empire that created Quipus, it was Quipus that created the powerful Inca Empire. I mean, information is the lifeblood of any advanced civilization. The ability to keep and copy and distribute records and ideas and marching orders kind of makes everything else possible. Of course, this information is only useful if there's people who can decipher that information. And for the Incas, that was a group called the Quipu Kamayoks. I think that's the best you're going to get. Quipu Kamayoks, that's what it's called. Yeah, this actually makes me think of the medieval monks that were like the only people that could read back then, so they were the keepers of like the religious texts and the written histories and stuff. But anyway, once the Spanish Conquistadors came through and started changing everything, the Quipus stopped being used. And the Quipu Kamayoks eventually died out. So, yeah, after that, all this information just became lost for like hundreds of years. But then a Harvard student named Manny Medrano came along who nerded harder than any nerd has ever nerded in the history of nerddom. It's clear that was a compliment, right? Okay, so back in 2016, Manny was taking a class from a professor named Gary Urton, who happens to be one of the world's foremost experts on Quipus. He's literally traveled the world examining Quipus in detail, and he created the Quipu Database Project in 2002. He's kind of like the Indiana Jones of Quipus, and he eventually collected more than 900 in their database. what the quipus represented in a general sense, like the census data, registers of goods, that kind of thing. But nobody could really understand them at a detailed level. Like, if they included messages or cultural information beyond the numbers, they were never quite sure. But a breakthrough came for Urton while he was studying a set of 6 quipus from the 17th century Santa River Valley region in northwest Peru. At the same time that he was studying those, he also just happened to come across some Spanish census documents from the same time and place. And what he noticed was that many of the numbers in the Spanish census record matched the 6 quipus perfectly. So yeah, basically he was able to match these quipus to a Spanish colonial document. Not quite as good as a Rosetta Stone, but close. So Urton kind of mentioned this finding to his undergrad students in the spring of 2016, and that's when Manny Medrano was in class. Medrano, by the way, he wasn't an archaeology student. He was an economics major. He just kind of took this Inca civilization class as an elective. He just kind of wanted to study a time in history he didn't know anything about. And something about this puzzle of the quipus fascinated him, so when Urton brought this up in class, Medrano offered to help. Yeah, our guy even offered to spend his spring break comparing the documents to the quipus to try to crack the code. As he told Atlas Obscura in 2017, quote, "I have a love of puzzles, just for entertainment. I love to do a Sudoku in the plane or something, but this is so much more profound." Oh my god, can I adopt this guy? How old is too old to adopt somebody? 30? Can you adopt a 30-year-old? I could adopt a 30-year-old. So yeah, Urton gave him access to the database, probably thinking nothing would come of it, Knock yourself out, kid. I've been working on this for years. But guys, he did it. He actually cracked the code. This is some Goodwill Hunting here.
How do you like them apples?
He basically graphed the data and looked for patterns. And what he noticed was that each chord that was tied onto the quipu kind of appeared to correspond to the social status of 132 people recorded in that census record. And the string colors seemed to appear related to people's first names. He figured all this out over spring break. Just told Urton about it when he came back on Monday, just casual. Solved a 1,000-year mystery. What? The two continued working together over the next few months and then published a paper in Ethnohistory in January 2018. Urton believes the 6 quipus used in this research could help decode hundreds of other quipus. Like, the chord's colors, corresponding to the first names may hint at the meanings of colors in other quipus. As Medrano told the Harvard Gazette in 2017, quote, "We now know not only that there were 6 clans in the valley, but also what social status each clan and each villager held in Rukway society. I love the idea that there might be numbers or words encoded in these knotted chords." Research is ongoing to pull these new details out of the quipus, but the basics of how the accounting worked in the quipus is actually pretty simple. Here's how to read a quipu. First off, a lay of the land. Quipus are made up of a main chord across the top, and tied to the main chord are what they've named H chords. And sometimes attached to those H chords is another chord called a B chord, and along the H and B chords there's a series of knots. These knots add up to a number. It works like this. There's 3 types of knots: single knot, long knot, and a figure-8 knot. So each of these knots mean different things, and where they are in the string means different things. It's probably better if I just show you. The string is basically a decimal system, with sections of the string divided up by ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and so on. Single knots are used in the tens place and above to indicate a number of that unit, so say 4 knots in the hundreds place means 400. The long knot and figure-8 knot are only used in the bottom category to denote single digits. The figure-8 knot means 1, and the long knot can mean 2 through 9 depending on how many loops are in that knot. So a long knot that looks like this means 2. A long knot that looks like this means 9. So if you take our string and turn it sideways, these 4 sections of knots line up with the 4 digits of the number that we're looking for. And we just go left to right. 1 knot in the thousands place means 1,000. 7 knots in the hundreds place means 700. 2 in the tens spot means 20. And this long knot has 5 loops on it, so that's 5. And that's our number, 1,725. Maybe this guy has 1,725 sheep in his stable. Let's move on to the next one. This one doesn't have anything in the thousands place, so we start here with 300. Now this one has a long knot, which usually these are reserved for the ones place, but sometimes they did use them up here in the same way. So this long knot has 8 loops on it. That would stand for 80 in this place. They probably did that just to avoid having to tie 8 whole knots. But in this last place, you have a figure-8 knot. That means 1. That only ever means 1. So our number is 381. Maybe that's this other guy's brother and has 381 heads of sheep. So maybe he's not doing so well. And this third line might be an uncle or a cousin, and he's got 1,500. There's nothing in the tens place, so that's just a 0. And then a long knot with 4 loops, so that's 4. So 1,504. So these 3 strings tally out the livestock for this family. So they'd be grouped together on this quipu, and sometimes they'd include a line at the end of the group called a totalizer line, which is basically a sum total of the group. So in our case, the totalizer line would equal, let's see, 1725 plus 381 plus 1504 is 3610. So it would look like this. Add the next family and another group on the string, and the next family after that, and so on. And the next thing you know, you've got a living ledger of all the families and tribes in your kingdom. But that's just the basic framework. On top of that, they added layers and layers of meaning to all kinds of things. Like different colors might mean different things, like maybe a blue string counts as chickens and red strings count as sheep, or as Manny Medrano found out, maybe it correlates to the first name. Some strings had stripes and patterns on them. That might have meant something different. The texture of the string, the width of the string might have had different meanings. The way they were tied to the main chord might have carried information. Some knots were tied in opposite directions. Maybe that meant that they had a debt to someone. But they were able to use these multiple layers of meanings to get across complex details that told a story. A Jesuit missionary even said that an Inca woman brought her a quipu that she said told her entire life story. Unfortunately, we don't know how to read the knots to that level anymore, and it's a bummer, because, this is one of the great ancient civilizations, and there are piles of these things all over the place that could tell us the entire story. We just don't know how to do it. It's like the hieroglyphics all over again, with no Rosetta Stone. But maybe we're getting closer? In 2015, 2 quipus were found in the remote village of San Juan de Colada in the Peruvian Andes. They were found by anthropologist Sabine Hyland, and she believes that these quipus are special because they're logosyllabic, meaning the knots and the differences in the fibers corresponded to phonetic sounds, which formed words. And they were able to translate them to a point. They were basically letters exchanged between local leaders during a revolt against the Spanish authorities in the early 1800s. Kind of like a spy code. And also, yes, these were being used into the 1800s. But these quipus had embedded animal hair from different animals in the various knots and whatnot in the quipu. And apparently the different textures of those fibers carried different meaning. So to read this quipu, you kind of had to use your hands. Sort of like Braille. Analysis showed that these quipus contained 95 different symbols, with each colada quipu ending with a 3-chord sequence of distinct colors, fibers, and ply direction. As Hylands wrote in Sapiens in 2017, quote, "What are the implications of a 3-dimensional writing system, in which the sense of touch plays as important a role as sight, and how does this expand our understanding of what writing is?" This is a really exciting indication of just how much information there is to find in these quipus, which, unfortunately, is only a fraction of the number of quipus that once existed. Yeah, along with everything else that they did to the Incas, the Spanish actually destroyed a lot of the quipus that they ran across just because they didn't understand them. So the quipus that do exist are fairly precious, and that makes deciphering them all the more important. Progress is being made, but unfortunately the language of the quipus is still mostly forgotten. If you think you could be the one that cracks the code, maybe take Dr. Urton's class at Harvard. There you'll learn everything there is to know. Oh, crap. Languages changing or dying out is kind of a natural process when different societies mix. Sometimes a more dominant language wins out because successive generations just find it more socially advantageous to use it, and eventually they just stop teaching their born language to their kids. It's kind of a quality of life issue when it comes down to it. Like, when you have to speak a specific language to get a job and access to education or healthcare, so people might just focus on that one language. So on one hand, it happens, but as we've seen with the Inca quipus, losing a language does carry great costs. We lose memories of our planet's history and culture. We lose resources for locally fighting environmental threats. We lose what it means to be a human. But maybe there's hope yet for the quipus. Research is ongoing, and hey, there's another spring break right around the corner. Who knows what discoveries will be made this time around. So I've been wanting to talk about quipus for a while, and it was kind of fun actually making one. I actually first read about them in the book 1491, and I was just fascinated by it. The whole idea of there being a string-based language, Anyway, I thought you guys might find it interesting too. Yeah, maybe they'll find a quipu that says, "We've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty," because you somehow wound up on an ancient Incan database somewhere. Because that's kind of what quipus are, when you think about it. Not so much computers, I've been calling them computers this whole video, but maybe more like hard drives, like just a place to store data. A database, if you will. Yeah, I'm sure the people who spent countless hours tying knots together in these ropes to record people's personal information would probably be in awe at all the personal information that gets collected nowadays. I mean, there's a whole online marketplace around it, around your info. That's why our phones and our inboxes are filled with text and email spam. That's why we open our mail over the trash can, because there are literally hundreds of data brokers buying and selling your personal information in an endless loop. And they aren't using quipus to do it. And that's why I'm happy to tell you about Incogni, who's sponsoring this video. Okay, so here's the deal about those data brokers I was talking about. As intrusive as it all feels, it's perfectly legal. until you ask to be removed from their list. If you ask them to remove you, they have to, by law. The problem is there are hundreds of these data broker companies, and it would be literally impossible for you by yourself to contact all of them, much less keep track of them and follow up with them regularly to make sure you're taking off all the lists. That's where Incogni comes in. When you sign up for Incogni, you basically give them permission to contact these data brokers on your behalf. And then, yeah, they get to business. They find all the lists that you're on, they start contacting them, and here's the best part, they follow up with them. And they follow up with them, and they continue to follow up with them until you are taken off that list. It's kind of like you're spamming the spammers. I signed up to Incogni to test it out, and so far it looks like I've been removed from 57 lists, and the last time I did the math, the number of unsolicited texts and calls had gone down by 20%, and that was just after a week. I'm pretty sure it's gotten a lot better since then. I haven't redone the math, but it has been significantly better. And by the way, this isn't just getting rid of an annoyance, it can protect your personal safety, because they also get you off these things called people search sites, where it's not just data brokers that can find your address, literally anybody can. So if you want to take a look for yourself, you can use the code JoeScott at the link below and get 60% off the annual Incogni plan. Like, I would love it if you didn't need a service like this, but that's the world we live in now. So if you want to protect your online privacy, finally rid yourself of spammers, it's worth a shot. So it's incogni.com/JoeScott, or just click the link in the description below. All right, thanks for watching, and a big shout out to the Answer Files on Patreon and the channel members who are supporting this channel, invested in it in a very visceral way, which I appreciate more than you can ever know. I got to shout out a few Patreon people real quick. We've got Blake Ingval, Joe Edwards, LF Gibson 3000, Adam K, Basco Wilkie, Rob Nicholas, and Christoph S. Thank you guys so much. If you would like to join them, get early access to videos, access to a whole wonderful community of people and a Discord server and all kinds of fun stuff, you can just go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. As always, please like and share this video if you liked it, and if this is your first time here, I'll put a video up right here, maybe on some other lost language or something. I'll figure it out. Or you can check out any of the videos on the little sidebar if you're watching it on your computer, and if it has my face on it, and if it's a thumbnail on one of my videos, I invite you to check it out, and if you like it, hey, I invite you to subscribe, because I come back with videos every Monday. All right, that's it for now. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week, stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.